Hello, friends. Welcome back to 1D10T Does Stuff, and I am the 1D10T in charge, Trevor Stewart 1308. And we will be reading from Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia by Sabrina Strings. Today, cheese. We will be reading from this book today. Hi, Just Me Crystal. Great to see you. Hope you're doing well and mending well. Just Me Crystal recently had surgery for a broken shoulder, and we are praying for her swift recovery. Swift and total recovery. For the most part, yeah. Shout-outs given. Oh. So, yeah, today's pre-rolls brought to you by the Kush Gang, but, acquired at the Hidden Leaf, downtown Charlottesville, 105 West Main Street, on the downtown mall above the bricks. Suite 200, a great place to go a great place to go with some great buds to get some great buds. A bud, and the only thing better than their bud is their customer service. Also, they have the lowest prices in town, according to my own personally highly biased research, by which I mean I was incredibly high when I did my biased research. And they have Frosty Fridays, a sales event on Friday afternoons where you can find Kush Gang snacks, where I got these pre-rolls. I ran out of the Hidden Leaf pre-rolls earlier this week. But yeah, you can find Kush Gang at Frosty Fridays. Kush Gang, purveyors of fine edibles and drinkables. Findable on Instagram at KGSnacks434, where you can also find Hidden Leaf at The Hidden Leaf. And you can find our other sponsor, Firehouse Organics. That's Firehouse spelled with a Z. You can find them on Instagram at Firehouse, spelled with a Z, Organics. A note of disclaimer. I will be expressing some opinions throughout the show today, and those opinions belong to me. Other opinions belong to other people. Those opinions do not necessarily belong to any of our advertisers, including Hidden Leaf, Kush Gang, and Firehouse, spelled with Z. Alright. So, let's get into it. First thing I wanted to do is I wanted to bring up that when we get through this book, when we finish Fearing the Black Body, we are going to look at changing up the format of Tuesday streams a little bit. I am in danger of burning out on Tuesday streams, and could use to change it up a bit. Now, as you notice, I have this stream set to a charity stream for a charity called Mental Health Liberation that is, according to their page, I haven't looked too deeply into them, but according to their page, they are, they're facilitating mental health help for specifically women of color, but I think for women in general. So that's going to stay a constant for our Tuesday streams. I think I'm going to start splitting it up so that every other Tuesday stream, instead of discussing sexism and racism in the medical institutions in America, we will be doing that. We'll still be doing that in some of our Tuesday streams. Half of our Tuesday streams will be that, and I think the other half are going to be crafternoons. I need to get back to being creative. The time that I have recently spent making a new song has reminded me that I have not been, other than going out and doing some photography that is fun and good for my soul, is not necessarily the outlet that I need it to be. And so I believe, these Tuesday crafternoons are going to be more dedicated to being creative, to really being creative for me. And I'm going to try and pick up painting again. That's going to be I think that is going to be something we are going to try and do. So, that is the big news going on right now. We'll see how that plays out. I definitely, doing Tuesday streams is, I feel like I have a platform, I have to say something. Specifically, I have a platform and I have to say something about this stuff. But in general, this is good. Streaming is good fun for me and good for me, but for the most part, it is not itching that creative part of my soul, or not scratching that creative itch for that part of my soul. And I was thinking about trying to get back to doing scripted shows, like on Saturday and stuff, but I think we've got a fun dynamic on Saturdays. So I don't really want to mess with that. The format as it is doesn't have room for doing scripted shows. And I'm okay with that. I'm also not ready to try and make video essays, because I just don't think I have the background in essay writing that would be required for that. So I think my outlet needs to be painting. Well, not necessarily painting, but those arts that I can concentrate on while streaming. Streaming isn't exactly a good format for scripted content. it would be kind of neat to try to do radio plays of a type, but I really don't think that this is... it would be challenging. It would be very challenging. So, well, alright, that's the news out of the way. At least channel news. Let's get into it. You know, as I said, Tuesdays are about discussing racism and sexism in the medical institutions in the United States, and specifically the difficulties and dangers for Black women in the mental and behavioral medical institutions. Medical or mental and behavioral health institutions. We have been reading from a bunch of books that... three, that give us some background on this. And specifically, Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia by Sabrina Strings, is drawing a line to explaining how we got to what current health standards are in the United States, and how that has racial origins. You know, it isn't just the... Fat phobia is one of the, you know, how do I want to say this? It's a good example for her to concentrate on for writing this book. But it is one of many medical conventions that come out of racism, and the racism specifically developed to justify and facilitate isn't quite the right word, enable the transatlantic slave trade and the racism that followed. So yeah, that's sort of what we're getting to. Some of the other books have pointed out how that racism and sexism has translated into the present day. And I do recommend reading them, although off the top of my head I can't remember what the names of the books are. Crap. Anyway, it is Oh, Sickened and Inflamed. Those are the other two books we read. Sickened by Anne Pollock and Inflamed by and Raj Patel. Blank and Raj Patel. It's almost there. I can almost remember. Anyway. So let us dig in and get started. We are in the chapter Birth of the Aesthetic. And we are currently in the early decades of the 18th century, around there. And still in England. We have not moved into the US yet. Let's see, we're gonna jump back we're gonna jump back a paragraph and get us a running start. Slide that down a little. Already, by the early decades of the 18th century, English women of good standing were slimming down. Many had incorporated diet and weight-related ideals of decency into their own self-understandings. They had started taking the amount of fat on a woman's body as indicative of her cultivation, or lack thereof. The letters of Lady Mary Wortley Montagu are a signpost of the early 18th century wave of cultured women against fat. Lady Mary was born in London in 1689, and 3 days after her birth, she was baptized in St. Paul's Church, which, before the 1662 Act of Uniformity, had been the pulpit of the well-known Puritan minister Thomas Manton. In 1712, Lady Mary eloped with Sir Edward Wortley Montagu, a member of the Whig Parliament and ambassador to the Ottoman Empire. Ooh, sounds like a heck of a dude. A few years later, she traveled with her husband to Constantinople, now Istanbul. Why did Constantinople get the works? That's nobody's business but the Turks. Why, Trevor? Why do you do this to yourself? Why did you do this? Because you can't help it. I remember when I was first reading it, and I saw it, and it just in my head, and I was like, oh, Sabrina Strings had to know somebody out there was gonna make that connection. Even old New York was once New Amsterdam. Why they changed it, I can't say. Guess I just liked it better that way. Again, I'm sorry, friends. That was unnecessary. All right. It was among the Ottoman Turks that Lady Mary would gather the source material for her Turkish embassy letters, today regarded as the basis of her literary reputation. In the letters, Lady Mary offers witty, if rude, observations on the difference between English and Turkish women in terms of their food consumption. In one instance, she reflects with alarm on the amount of food and drink she consumed on a given day, having a, having a diet composed largely of milk. I wake generally about 7 and drink half a pint of warm ass's milk. I constantly take 3 cups of milk coffee after that, a large cup of milk chocolate. At 5 in the afternoon, I take another dose of ass's milk. Lady Mary largely milk based Lady Mary's largely milk-based diet seems very similar to the diet championed by Dr. George Cheyenne. As it turns out, Lady Mary and Countess Huntington, the latter an ardent disciple of Cheyenne, traveled in the same social circles, although evidence suggests that they might have been frenemies rather than friends. Lady Mary does not mention Cheyenne by name, but similarities between the items in her food diary and those recommended by the proselytizing doctor should not be dismissed. Regardless of whether she received her dietary ideas directly from Cheyenne himself, it is significant that the milk diet is credited with popularizing he is credited with popularizing had evidently become fashionable among a wide swath of the hot English women. Like many others who had adopted the milk diet, Lady Mary was of rather fine and a fragile build. She had been a celebrated beauty in London prior to her departure from the Near East. But in 1715, her appearance was marred by smallpox. Nevertheless, given her reputation, it was with good reason she presented herself as knowledgeable about the principles of beauty in England in her letters. As per Lady Mary, embonpoint was an appropriate form of embodiment only for non-English others and not for an English lady. For instance, Lady Mary waxes lyrically about the beauty of Turkish women, seeming at first blush to even envy them. Turkish women, she rhapsodizes, were exactly as proportioned as ever any goddess was drawn by pencil of Guido or Titan. Their skins are shiningly white, perfectly representing the figures of the Graces. Turks would have been considered part of the first race in the early 18th century racial categorizations. Therefore, her administration of their shiningly white skins would not have been unusual. While Lady Mary praises the complexions and figures of Turkish women, she nevertheless regards them as other. She suggests that they possess an ahistorical, or as described by Cynthia Lowenthal, author of Lady Mary Wortley Montagu and the 18th century familiar letter, as a prelapsarian and sensuous type of embodiment that she considered inappropriate for herself and other members of English high society. Further proof that that Turkish practices were incompatible with polite English society surfaces when Lady Mary attempts some of Turkish women's beauty practices. When she tries a face balm intended to restore the complexion of her face, swelled to a very extraordinary size and all over was red. Thereafter, she vowed never again to try this type of unnatural cosmetic aid, suggesting that her delicate English skin was not compatible with Eastern magic. Arguably, the best let's try that again. Arguably, the best evidence of her sentiment that Turkish aesthetics and beauty practices were incompatible with English norms is that she declined an invitation to participate in the Turkish baths. Lady Mary refused to participate in this beautification rite since it required to remove her stays, the naked freedom that made the Turkish women's archaic brand of beauty possible conflicted with her chaste modern sensibilities. She was unwilling to forego the latter to achieve the former. Her view of Turkish aesthetics were antiquated and improper for a proper English lady is also evident in her treatment of pudgy English women. Although she gushed over the fleshy and sensuous figures of Turkish women and admitted that perhaps she and other like-minded English women were refining too much, she is nevertheless repulsed by the sight of corpulent aristocratic women. Of of one of these women of one of these women, Countess Orkney, present at the coronation of George II in 1727, she writes, "She that drew the greatest number of eyes was indisputably Lady Orkney. She exposed behind a mixture of fat and wrinkles, before a very considerable protuberance which preceded her. Add to this the inimitable roll of her eyes and her grey hairs, which by good fortune stood directly upright. 'Tis impossible to imagine a more delightful spectacle. She had embellished all this with considerable magnificence, which made her look as big again as usual, and I should have thought her one of the largest things of God's making, if my Lady St. John had not displayed all her charms in honor of the day. Okay. Hi, baby. All right. I was about to try and parse out that, but really, that's just mean. That's just mean. Um, I think with Lady Mary Wortley Montague, with her uh, assessments, critiques, we are really starting to see the othering of anybody who is not of the refined English or European classes, the very white of the English and the European, and we're starting to really see the othering of large bodies. This is around the same time that we're gonna start seeing the comparing of large bodies. I'm pretty sure this is around the same time. I mean, we've seen the Let me try that again. We're gonna start seeing the comparison of black bodies to large bodies. That those two are really going to start equating here shortly. We've seen the seeds of it being sown all the way along, but it's going to become highly pronounced as the refined white body is seen as exceedingly trim. So that's where we're going, and we're still. I mean, we're dancing into. For about a century now, we've been dancing into the realm of medical. The medical ideas. Beauty ideas and medical ideas sort of equating to each other. So, yeah. There is no way to know if or how much the fat English women Lady Mary differed from the fleshy Turkish graces she commended. We do know that when praising Turkish women, she used Titan as her reference points, and his models were known for being on the more voluptuous side. We also know that the racial and national identities of women stood out as major distinctions in a move that recalled Shaftesbury's hierarchy of beauty. What was considered beautiful among the colonial others was a laughable affront to English propriety. the slender physiques of refined English women may have been sneered at as excessive by men like Joseph Spence, but it was at the same time admired, recorded, and sanctified by other women and men of high station. After the 1740s, this felt idea, this new ascetic aesthetic, was immortalized in the arts. The 18th century English artist Thomas Gainsborough was a bellwether of the new feminine aesthetic sensibility. A talented painter as a young child growing up in Sudbury, comma, Gainsborough had amassed an impressive artistic portfolio even before he reached his teens. In 1740, at age 13, he was off to London to study under French painter and draftsman Hubert Francois Gavinlot. It was in London that Gainsborough made the acquaintance of William Hogarth, who would also become a mentor to the young artist. Gainsborough had imagined himself to be a landscape artist, but when he landed in London, patrons of the arts weren't especially keen on investing in landscape paintings of an unknown adolescent. Consequently, he was forced to turn his attention to the more lucrative market of portraiture. Following an artistic path that mirrored that of Renaissance master Peter Paul Rubens more than a century earlier, he was often commissioned to paint pretty young society ladies. Two of his earlier iconic renderings of women appeared in couples portraiture. Between 1745 and 1750, Gainsborough painted Conversation in a Park and Mr. and Mrs. Andrews. The works appear to be playing on the theme of love and courtship among the refined, giving the portraitist a chance to show off his skill in landscape portrayal. They are set in an idyllic countryside, the otherwise vacant setting occupied by a small bench on which the couple sit. In Conversation in a Park, a lady of the upper crust sits demurely on a bench as her companion makes a play for her affection. The woman keeps her gaze fixed knowingly on the portraitist, gamely rebuffing the advances of the young man by her side. Her expression suggests she is not put off by her suitor, only playing the game of displaying a lack of interest appropriate to her station. In Mr. and Mrs. Andrews, Gainsborough depicts a young married couple. Mr. Andrews assumes a similar posture of coolness, her dress cascading out to cover almost the entire expanse of the bench. Her husband, standing, leans on the edge of her seat with a downward-pointing rifle held loosely in the crook of his arm, in a posture that conveys both ownership of the fine Miss Andrews and manly duty. In addition to the cavalier expressions and billowing dresses of the young ladies of leisure, the women in the two paintings are united by their pale, lithe appearance. In a representation of beauty that had been uncommon among master portraitists in early generations. Let me start that Sentence again. In a representation of beauty that had been uncommon among master portraitists of earlier generations, Gainsborough's ladies were thin and fine. Their shoulders were rounded and sloping, their slender, elongated necks were accentuated by the cut of their dresses, their tiny waists almost disappeared into the folds of their gowns. Gainsborough's representations of sailing. Let me take a second. Stumbling on words. Cheese and crackers, Trevor. I think it's important to follow the path of the art here, because eventually the art will be taken as the record of note. Because there is no other record of note. I mean, other than the writings. And again, the writings at the time are keeping up with this thin, fine, white ideal. Not even keeping up with. They are setting this thin, fine, white ideal, both for men and for women. All right, let's keep going. Gainsborough's representations of slim, sensible, high society ladies were rousing and evocative. Pardon me. Pardon me. Between the 1760s and the 1780s, Gainsborough would paint dozens of them. I think this is important because it gives us some idea of how this is progressing over time. His 1760 rendering of the English musician Anne Ford became an enduring and recognizable image of Ford's beauty and evidence of Gainsborough's talents. Befitting her life as an artist, Ford appears both refined and self-possessed. Her form is less delicate and her figure less slight than those of the women in the two landscapes. But one would be hard-pressed not to call her slender. I'll get there in a minute, I guess. Either that or I moved that. Of Gainsborough's many and celebrated portraits of high society, ladies. Not all of them were represented as svelte. His much praised portrait of Lady Georgiana Cavendish, Duchess of Devonshire, depicts a buxom beauty, voluptuous and proportionate in the manner revered by the Renaissance masters. Since other portraits depict the Duchess similarly, Gainsborough's illustration of her was likely his best attempt at representing her true shape. Yet a considerable number of women who sat for Gainsborough were portrayed as being lithe and fine. His 1775 painting of Miss Lowndes Stone and his 1777 portrait of Honorable Francis Duncombe serve as two further examples. For some scholars, a sylph-like type of feminine beauty has become synonymous with the name Gainsborough. Gainsborough may have tried to accurately reflect the slender forms of the wealthy women he painted. As Joseph Spence suggested, and Lady Mary attested, the women who appeared to have had a preference for being svelte, or he may have taken a bit of artistic license and imbued them with the lines of his preferred aesthetic. Either way, Gainsborough's body of work represents, among other things, a sustained meditation on the slender as beautiful. Gainsborough's influence on the history of art is unquestioned, and whether or not he can lay claim to having commemorated the famed British author Lady Mary in his artistic portfolio, she too became an inspiration in the development of svelteness as a feminine beauty ideal. This trend, already visible in 18th century England, would reach new heights in popularity in the 19th century. By then, there would be much less ambivalence than had been seen among its earlier adherents. 19th century woman would be proudly slender and profess a Protestant Anglo-Saxon heritage, and these women were to be found in the United States. Dun dun dun. And here we are in this next chapter, American Beauty, chapter number 5. We are going to start getting into how this translated across the ocean over here in this country. We are not going to get into this today. I know that this is going to make this book take longer to get through, but part of not burning out for me is taking my time doing this. Trying to do this quickly would both, I think, keep us from really grasping the material. I'd just be reading. I wouldn't be stopping to concentrate on what's going on. I also think that, you know, keeping it short is keeping it from getting too heavy for me. You know, this is we will be we'll be crossing the puddle next time, crossing the pond, and seeing how this takes shape in the US. And when we do that, what we're gonna see is that it really takes an American to really mess things up. We go big or go home, even when it's going small. Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing. So, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Just Me Crystal. Thank you, Darth Dragonis. I will be back on later this evening on my DJ account. I'm going to go ahead and try and DJ a set tonight. So, thank you everyone for being here. Hope to see you there. And most likely we will be back on Thursday for when we will be watching another episode of The Venture Brothers and another episode of Flynn's Arcade. So that should be a lot more fun than this. Thank you everyone for joining me. Thank you for sticking around while I fill for time, just so that we're closer to an hour, even though I don't really want us to get that long. Thank you, Just Me Crystal. Thank you, Darth Dragonis. Thank you, all you lurkers. Much love. Now is the time on the show when I say, as they say around here, 2 up, 2 down, VA, double deuces. I'm out, y'all.
I tried not to reach that comparison because it seemed crazy when it first popped in my head. Really? La Cosa Nostra and the President of the United States?
I can't wait for all the children in the audience to get horrible nightmares from the monster. Horrible nightmares monster.
The end.